3 years ago, a research team made a decision that nobody in genetics had attempted at this scale. They took genetic profiles from thousands of Black Americans and ran them against the ancient DNA of every major civilization that science has ever managed to sequence. Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, ancient Greece, Rome, the Phoenicians, the Hittites. One by one they compared. One by one the results came back the same way. No match, no match, no match. And then with one civilization, everything changed. The match was not just significant, it was so deep, so consistent, and so old that it forced scientists to reframe something fundamental about who Black Americans actually are and where the oldest thread of their DNA leads. Before we dive in, comment where you are watching from and subscribe. Let's begin with what scientists were actually looking for and why this kind of comparison had never been done properly before. For most of human history, the genetic record of ancient civilizations was locked in silence. The bones of Egyptians, Sumerians, and Greeks sat in museum vaults and burial sites, their DNA degraded or inaccessible. But over the last 2 decades, a revolution in ancient DNA technology, pioneered in large part by geneticist David Reich and his team at Harvard Medical School, changed everything. Scientists learned how to extract genetic material from teeth and the dense inner ear bones of ancient remains, even in conditions that should have destroyed it completely. And one by one, the genomes of the ancient world began to open. By 2024, researchers had full or partial genome sequences from ancient Egyptians, Mesopotamians, Anatolians, Minoans, Romans, Phoenicians, and populations from the Indus Valley. The ancient world was no longer genetically silent. Scientists could now look at the DNA of a person who died in Mesopotamia 6,000 years ago and compare it, letter by letter, to the genome of a living person in Baltimore or Atlanta. They could measure genetic distance between populations separated by continents and millennia, with the same precision a chemist measures compounds in a lab. And for the first time in history, it became possible to ask a question that would have been completely unanswerable just 20 years ago. Which ancient civilization, if any, left its genetic fingerprint inside the DNAs of Black Americans today? The researchers started where everyone starts when they think about ancient Africa: Egypt. Egypt is the most famous civilization in the ancient world. Its pyramids, its pharaohs, its hieroglyphs. The image of ancient Egypt is inseparable from any conversation about African history and identity. For generations, Black Americans in particular have felt a deep cultural and spiritual connection to Egypt, seeing in the pyramid builders an ancient African glory that history tried to erase. And when scientists compared Black American DNA to the sequenced genomes of ancient Egyptians, mummies from the New Kingdom, the Roman period, and a groundbreaking full genome published in July 2025 from the Old Kingdom dating back 4,500 years, the findings were striking, but not in the direction most people expected. That Old Kingdom individual, whose genome was extracted from a tooth discovered at a Nile Valley site and announced in a study co-authored by the British Museum, carried ancestry that was roughly 80% North African Neolithic and 20% from West Asia, regions like Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, and Syria. Ancient Egyptians were a Northeast African people with deep local roots and significant ancient ties to the Near East. They were not, genetically speaking, sub-Saharan Africans. The connection that popular culture had long imagined Black Americans as the genetic heirs of the pyramid builders was not what the ancient DNA showed. Egypt, for all its Nile Valley geography and African location, was genetically distinct from the West and Central African populations that are the primary ancestral source of Black Americans today. The match was not there, not at the level of genome-wide ancestry, not even close. So the scientists moved on. Mesopotamia, the Tigris and Euphrates, the birthplace of writing, of the wheel, and of the first cities. The Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Babylonians, ancient DNA from Mesopotamian sites, analyzed by the Harvard Reich Lab, revealed a population shaped by Anatolian, Caucasian, and Levantine hunter-gatherers. Their genetic profile was firmly West Asian, Middle Eastern in the modern sense. When compared to the sub-Saharan African ancestry that dominates Black American genomes, the genetic distance was enormous. There was no meaningful match. Indus Valley civilization, Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, one of the most advanced urban societies of the ancient world, told a similar story. Their genome-wide ancestry traced back to South Asian hunter-gatherers mixed with Iranian farmers. That ancestry was completely separate from the African genetic lineage. It was a completely different branch of the human tree, no match. Ancient Greece. The Minoans of Crete and the Mycenaeans of mainland Greece, both sequenced by David Wright's team in a landmark 2017 Nature paper, were predominantly descended from early Anatolian farmers, with a secondary layer of steppe ancestry from the Eurasian grasslands. Their DNA and the DNA of Black Americans share the deep common ancestry all humans share. We are all one species, 99.9% identical at the base level, but at the level of population ancestry, they are entirely distinct. No match. Rome, the Phoenicians, the Hittites, each one tested, each one returned the same result. The ancient civilizations that history books taught the world to see as the foundations of human achievement, every single one of them was genetically distant from the African ancestry that makes up the majority of Black American DNA. The elimination sequence was complete, and that left one question hanging in the air. If not Egypt, and not Mesopotamia, and not Greece or Rome, then what? If you are watching this, and you have never asked yourself that question before, subscribe right now, because the answer is something that rewrites the story of civilization itself. The answer was not one single ancient civilization in the way the question had been framed. It was something older and in many ways more remarkable. When scientists turned their analysis toward the ancient populations of West and Central Africa, the genetic ancestors of the Yoruba, the Igbo, the Congo, the Mandinka, the Mende, and the Akan, they were not looking at civilizations sequenced from mummies or burial urns. They were looking at something that ancient DNA science had only recently begun to illuminate, and what they found fundamentally changed the conversation. In January 2020, a team of international researchers published a landmark paper in Nature, the first full ancient genomes ever recovered from West Africa. The DNA came from 4 children buried at Shumlaka, a rock shelter in the grassfields region of northwestern Cameroon. 2 of the children had lived approximately 8,000 years ago. The other 2 had lived 3,000 years ago. One of those 8,000-year-old individuals carried something that stopped geneticists cold, a Y chromosome haplogroup called A00, the most deeply diverging Y chromosome lineage documented in any human being on Earth. The A00 lineage is estimated to have split from all other known human Y chromosome lineages between 200,000 and 300,000 years ago. That is not a typo. 300,000 years ago, before anatomically modern humans had fully emerged in the fossil record, this lineage was already branching, and it has been present in West Central Africa in almost exactly the same geographic region for more than 8,000 years of documented continuity, possibly much longer. Think about what that means. Ancient Rome is roughly 2,700 years old. Ancient Greece reaches back perhaps 3,500 years. The pyramids of Egypt were built 4,500 years ago. The A00 lineage found in Western Cameroon, in the ancestral homeland of the populations whose descendants were taken to America during the slave trade, is potentially 300,000 years old. There is no ancient civilization on Earth, no matter how grand, with a documented genetic lineage that comes anywhere close to that depth. Rome did not exist. Greece did not exist. Egypt did not exist. The Yoruba and their genetic ancestors were already here, but the story does not rest on a single Y chromosome. It runs much deeper and wider. The mitochondrial DNA of Black Americans, the The genetic material passed only through the maternal line from mother to daughter across every generation falls almost entirely within a family of lineages called haplogroup L. Researchers tracking the maternal ancestry of Black Americans have found that more than 75% of their sub-Saharan mitochondrial lineages trace back to West Africa, with the remainder coming from West Central and Southwestern Africa. These L haplogroups, L0, L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, L6, and a newly identified L7 lineage documented in a 2022 study published in Scientific Reports are the oldest maternal lineages in the entire human species. L0, carried today primarily by the San people of Southern Africa, is estimated to be approximately 145,000 years old, tracing back to what geneticists call mitochondrial Eve, the single common maternal ancestor of every human being alive today. L7, the most recently discovered branch, has been estimated at approximately 100,000 years old. No other population on Earth carries maternal lineages this old in such concentration. Europeans carry haplogroups like H, J, T, and U, lineages descended from women who left Africa tens of thousands of years ago, carrying only a narrow fraction of African genetic diversity with them. Asians carry similarly post-migration lineages. The L haplogroups are deep, ancient, root-level human DNA, and they stayed in Africa. They are the trunk of the human genetic tree, not the branches. And then across the Middle Passage, in the bodies of millions of enslaved people, a portion of those lineages arrived in America. When Black Americans today receive their ancestry results and see that 73 to 82% sub-Saharan African figure, they are not simply looking at a regional percentage. They are looking at the deepest layer of the human genetic tree, the lineages that all other human populations ultimately trace back to. Not descended from an ancient civilization, they are the ancient civilization, the original one, the one every other human population on Earth branched away from. The primary African ethnic groups whose DNA appears most consistently in Black American genomes are the Yoruba and Igbo of Nigeria, the Congo and Bundu of Central Africa, the Mandinka and Wolof of Senegambia, and the Mende of Sierra Leone. These are not random populations scattered across a continent. Each of these groups is the direct genetic descendant of civilizations that were ancient, sophisticated, and thriving long before European contact. The archaeological record of what they built is staggering. Start with the Igbo. In 1939, a man named Isaiah Anozie was digging a water cistern in his compound in Igbo Ukwu in Anambra State, Nigeria, and he found bronze. When archaeologists excavated the site in 1959 and 1964, they uncovered more than 700 high-quality artifacts of copper, bronze, and iron, along with approximately 165,000 glass, carnelian, and stone beads. Radiocarbon dating placed these objects at approximately 850 CE, making Igbo Ukwu the earliest known example of bronze casting in the entire region, centuries before the famous bronzes of Ife in Benin. The Metropolitan Museum of Art describes them as among the most inventive and technically accomplished bronzes ever made anywhere in the world. One ceremonial vessel alone was cast in 8 separate stages, with decorative insects and spirals embedded before the main body was formed. The artifacts were found alongside evidence of long-distance trade, stretching from Nigeria all the way to Egypt, through glass beads photos from Byzantine-era Egypt in the 9th century. These were the ancestors of the Igbo, one of the most common ancestral matches in Black American DNA databases today. The Nok civilization of central Nigeria goes back even further, to approximately 1500 BCE. The Nok were among the earliest iron smelters anywhere in sub-Saharan Africa, producing terracotta figurines of breathtaking sophistication, the likely stylistic ancestor of the Ife bronze tradition that followed centuries later. The Ife kingdom itself, founded between 1000 and 500 BCE, and reaching its artistic peak between the 12th and 15th centuries CE, developed bronze and brass casting techniques that European metallurgists would not match for another 300 years. The bronze portrait heads of Ife are so naturalistic and technically refined that when European explorers first encountered them in the early 20th century, some refused to believe Africans had made them. The racist assumption of incompetence collided with the physical evidence of mastery. The bronze heads won. The Kingdom of Congo, the second most common genetic match in Black American databases, according to 23andMe research, was one of the most powerful states in Africa at the time of European contact. It had a centralized government, a system of provinces and governors, a currency, an organized military, and a diplomatic tradition that saw Congolese ambassadors received at European royal courts. Its capital city, Mbanza, Congo, had a population estimated at 100,000 people in the 16th century, larger than Lisbon, larger than London. The Congo didn't exist in some primitive pre-civilization state when slave ships arrived. They were a functioning empire with a bureaucracy, a legal system, and diplomatic relationships spanning 2 continents. Their DNA is carried in Black American bodies across the United States today. The Mandinka and Wolof of Senegambia built the Mali Empire, one of the wealthiest nations in the history of the world. At its peak under Mansa Musa in the 14th century, the Mali Empire controlled more gold than any other entity on earth. His pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324 included 60,000 people in his entourage and 500 heralds carrying golden staffs. So much gold was distributed along the route that historians believe it depressed Mediterranean gold prices for over a decade. That pilgrimage remains one of the most extraordinary displays of national wealth ever recorded. The scholars of Timbuktu produced hundreds of thousands of manuscripts on mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and Islamic law, at a time when much of Europe was still rebuilding from the collapse of Rome. Their genetic descendants are the Mandinka and Wolof, whose DNA appears in Black American ancestry results from Georgia to Chicago to Los Angeles. Harvard Medical School's December 2024 study confirmed all of this with hard data. By sequencing the genomes of 27 enslaved individuals buried at Catoctin Furnace in Maryland between 1774 and 1850 and matching them against 23andMe's database, researchers identified that 41,799 living participants are genetically related to one or more of those individuals. Published in the journal Science, the study found that many of the Catoctin individuals descended primarily from the Wolof and Mandinka of Senegambia and the Congo of Central Africa. Real names, real ethnic groups, real kingdoms. It connected specific living Black Americans, tens of thousands of them, to specific enslaved ancestors, who in turn descended from specific civilizations whose names we now know. And the USC and Stanford study published in 2023 in the journal Genetics calculated that a Black American born between 1960 and 1965 descended from an average of more than 300 African ancestors, all traceable to the period beginning in 1619. 300 individual human beings, each one a thread connecting a living American to the Yoruba, the Congo, the Mandinka, the Igbo, to the iron smelters of Nak, to the bronze masters of Igbo Ukwu, to the portrait carvers of Ife, to the scholars of Timbuktu, to the diplomats of Mbanza, Congo. So when the scientists ran Black American DNA against every ancient civilization that had ever been sequenced and only one lineage matched, what they were really finding was this. The match was not a single ancient civilization like Egypt or Rome. The match was something older and larger than any of those. It was the ancestral genetic population of West and Central Africa, the population from which all other human populations ultimately derive. A genetic lineage documented back 300,000 years in the Shumlaka ancient DNA. A maternal lineage documented back 100,000 years in the El haplofull group family. A civilization tradition, Nak, Igbo Ukwu, Ife Mali, Congo, that was producing iron, bronze, art, political philosophy, and global trade networks long before Europe had any interest in Africa except as a source of human cargo. The match was not just with one ancient civilization, the match was with the origin point itself. For generations, the story told about Black Americans has been a story of loss, lost names, lost languages, lost ancestry, lost history. The genetic data does not erase that loss. The cultural severing of the Middle Passage was real, devastating, and its effects are still felt today. But what the science now adds to that story is something that cannot be taken away retroactively. It adds depth, it adds time, it adds the knowledge that the DNA brought to America in chains carried inside it, a lineage older than any pyramid, older than any empire, older than any of the civilizations that history books were built around. The people who built America's tobacco plantations and cotton fields were the genetic descendants of the people who first smelted iron in sub-Saharan Africa, who cast the oldest bronze in the region from a village in eastern Nigeria, who built empires wealthier than anything Europe had produced, and who carried within their cells a maternal lineage stretching 145,000 years back to the common ancestor of every human being on Earth. Their DNA says so. The data says so. The ancient genomes say so. And for the first time in centuries, the science has given that truth a number, a name, and a match.